Okay. Committee is probably going to be about 5 minutes late. Wednesdays, everything's all a mess in the House. So we are going to watch what MPs had to say after question period when reporters had a little scrum.
To run in the next federal election if the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is there. That's the bottom.
It's a bit loud. Hold on. Here we go.
On your campaign post?
Still a bit loud.
You know what? No party has made a fine art out of character assassination in the Conservative Party. And at the end of the day, once we get into an election, we'll take off the veil of Mr. Pierre Poilievre, and I believe that Mr. Trudeau will be back in his government.
On your campaign poster?
The Prime Minister will always be on my posters, and he's welcome in Winnipeg North anytime. With a beautiful name like Lamoureux, you would think I speak French. I'm sorry.
Do you think a secret vote would be a good option during the caucus meeting today to let people...
About Pierre Poilievre? Absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
Groupe de députés qui opèrent en secret pour faire signer un document. Est-ce que c'est constructif d'après vous? Est-ce qu'ils ont le droit de s'exprimer?
Ce qui est constructif, c'est de parler de...
Skip the French part. We don't need to hear the French part.
Vos collègues en secret pour faire signer ce document-là. On a parlé à des gens qui nous ont dit l'avoir.
Mais on ne sait pas qu'est-ce qui va passer. C'est légitime. On est là pour être en grande famille. Maintenant, si Pierre Poilievre est Premier ministre, il perd 20 000 $. Ça, c'est une famille.
In all of these internal discussions that you're having that have made it out to the public, is this going to hurt?
Look, there's what would you call it, some palace drama going on right now, and that takes us away from the number one job, which is focusing on Canadians and focusing on the important policies, but also on showing the really clear contrast between our government, our party, and Pierre Poilievre. I did some rough math last night, and a family in Edmonton with one kid in daycare would be $20,000 worse off under a Pierre Poilievre government.
What you're going to tell your...
Which Randy is that? Okay. We are getting right to committee. Do-do-do. Usually they don't have too long of a startup, and I just try to mute the music because it's not the most entertaining. So while we wait here, let's read some chats. He doesn't speak French. Boo! I know, right? He doesn't even comb his hair in the morning. Guy looks like he uses a balloon.
J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 146 du comité permanent.
Welcome to meeting 146 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table with respect to the audio system to prevent any feedback incidents. This is to protect the health and safety of all participants, especially our interpreters. A kind reminder to all those in person online for your safety and for the safety of our interpreters, that it is very important that microphones be muted when individuals are not speaking. All comments should be addressed to the chair. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement, le comité reprend l'examen.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee resumed consideration of Report 6, Sustainable Development Technology Canada 2024, Reports 5 to 7 of the Auditor General of Canada, referred to the committee on Tuesday, June 4, 2024.
He's not here. I was going to welcome him to committee. He's a new member. On a une substitution aujourd'hui. Bienvenue. So I'll turn then to our witness and welcome our new member at a later date. From the Privy Council office, Donalyn McClement, Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Senior Personnel and Public Service Renewal, and Rima Hamouni, Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Senior Personnel. Ms. McClement, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Over to you.
Last time Donalyn was in here, she got
Thank you, Mr.
roasted.
Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure those online are good too. Everybody's good? Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable members of the committee, hello. I would like to begin by recognizing that the lands on which we're gathered today are part of the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Further to our appearance last month, my colleague and I are here today to help the committee in its study of Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
That the committee is specifically seeking clarity on the process by which Ms. Verschuren was appointed to the Governor and Council position of SDTC Chair in 2019. In September of 2018, an open, transparent, and merit-based selection process was launched to find qualified candidates to fill the chair position. This process, as I mentioned previously, yielded a total of 6 candidates who were recommended to the then minister. I recognize that the committee has asked for further details related to this appointment. On that point, I would like to just take a few moments to provide some context on our approach to the management of candidate information. There are 2 key elements that guide us in our work. First, the Privy Council Office has a legal obligation under the Privacy Act to protect personal information. We take this obligation seriously and the responsibility it entails. And second, as only a small fraction of individuals who apply for GI positions are appointed, the fact that an individual has applied can be sensitive if released and could cause both professional and reputational damage. In addition, throughout our selection process, we gather a lot of detailed personal information, including responses to interview questions, information gathered through reference checks, and assessments made by the selection committee. Protecting this information is vital to our work. Applicants and candidates can reasonably expect that it is kept confidential, as it would be in any standard human resource practice. This is to maintain the integrity of the process so that individuals are not dissuaded from applying for these important roles. That said, we recognize that the committee has sought clarification on the selection process for Ms. Verschuren, and we know that it is very important to your study. We have therefore taken a very exceptional measure to seek Ms. Verschuren's consent to provide to the committee the details related to her appointment. This information has been sent to the committee clerk, but I will go through it in detail. I also just would like to mention that I have discussed this approach with the Privacy Commissioner. Given this unprecedented action on our part, and he thought that this was an appropriate approach in the circumstances.
Yeah,
so just to
right.
go through it quickly, Ms. Verschuren applied to the selection process through our open online portal on April 30th of 2019. She was interviewed on May 14th of 2019. Her application, interview, and references were assessed by the committee, and she was found to have met the criteria. As such, she was identified as a qualified candidate and provided through an advice letter to former Minister Baines as a recommended candidate on May 21st, 2019, and the Governor Council appointed her on June 19th, 2019 to the position. J'espère que ces informations sont utiles.
I hope this information is helpful to the committee, and thank you for your attention. We would be pleased to take your questions. Thank you very much.
4 members, we each have 6 minutes each. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor, please.
Chair, and thank you, witnesses. Nice to see you again. So, in response to a production order or documents motion here at the committee around Ms. Verschuren's appointment, PCO, as the witnesses referenced, has provided documents, and there's 107 pages, pages 12 to 30, pages 48 to 66, pages 78 to 84, page 97 to 103, are in total 41 pages. You can see them here in all the yellow stickies were redacted. They were redacted, which seems to be a PCO habit these days. Can you tell me who told you to redact these pages?
Mr. Chair, as I noted from the outset, as public servants, we are obligated under the Privacy Act to protect personal information. That said, I would just really emphasize for the committee that we have taken some very exceptional measures to provide as much information as possible to strike a very delicate balance of giving the committee the information that they need to do their work while respecting the personal information of the individuals who were qualified for the various processes. And I would just say, above and beyond that, we also had sought Ms. Verschuren's agreement to provide details for her appointment.
But that wasn't my question. Who authorized or said that these pages should be redacted in PCO?
Mr. Chair, we operate under the auspices of the Privacy Act, and we would have gone through the pages ourselves. My team would have looked and applied the Privacy Act. If we had any questions, we would have consulted with our legal counsel.
As the Department of the Prime Minister's Office, did the Prime Minister's Office review this before it was released?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chair. If they had an opportunity, not from our office, they wouldn't have reviewed it, no.
Will you table with the committee all the emails within PCO and PMO with regard to, with this committee, with regard to what should be done with these documents before it was tabled in committee?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but...
Well, you would have had lots of communication, email back and forth when you got the stack of documents about what to redact and hide from the committee and what not to. So will you table those emails with the committee?
We'll endeavor to see if we have any records on hand that could be helpful in that work, for sure.
Okay, so, you know, it's really hard to get at the details of this thing because, of course, Ms. Verschuren testified, and the first answer is usually the correct answer. She testified 3 times that she has not applied for anything in her life, and that Minister Baines called her twice before that. And a week later, she wrote a letter saying, of course, she applied, and I suspect she applied after she had had the 2 calls from Minister Baines. So does anything that you've redacted here deal with the issue of Minister Baines' phone calls to Ms. Verschuren to talk about taking this on to the job she didn't apply for?
Mr. Chair, we have provided the information as requested, so that would include the advice letter. As I mentioned, the advice letters that were requested, it would also contain personal information about the applicants. I would just underscore that we did note in our letter back that we didn't have any documents that had any transaction to the member's question between ourselves and the minister or the minister's office or the prime minister's office for that matter on her application or any further details.
No,
so
don't believe it.
You're obviously aware, the witness is obviously aware that we've been now 3 weeks dealing with, in the House, with a privilege motion of the breach of privilege of the House order for documents related to SDTC from every government department, which did not say censor them, redact them, but the government has redacted quite a few, including PCO is on the list. So if these documents were provided to the law clerk, were they provided in this form, redacted?
Sorry about that. Yes, Mr. Chair, we would have provided exactly the same redactions to the package that we would have provided to the law clerk, and we would be consistent with the law.
This is the list from the law clerk of the latest redacted departments versus the ones that didn't redact. There's a small list of didn't redact and a long list of did, and a couple of agencies here that have actually refused to comply. So what I'd like to know, because you're part of the Privy Council team, is who in the Privy Council office made the decision to send the order out to the two government departments saying, we want you to filter the House of Commons request through the Privacy Act and the Access to Information Act, that filter which was not part of the House's motion and is the point that we're discussing for the last 3 weeks in the House. Who made that decision to send that filter out?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't really be in a position to answer that. My assumption was I was here today to discuss the appointment. I guess to try to be as helpful as I can be on this point, we would apply the legislation, the Act,
I appreciate that, but that's not what the House order was. So I'd like you to please
point of order,
table
Mr.
with the
Chair.
committee.
Point of order.
We got a point of order already.
Just 1 second, Mr. Perkins. Yes.
Again, I respect my honourable colleague, who himself was a government and council appointment before this time, is asking questions that the witness is clearly not able to answer, and not her responsibility.
So,
and he's asking.
Okay, Mr. Duran, you are up in just a.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, have a little respect for witnesses, and maybe we can get somewhere.
Is
have a little respect for your colleagues in the House.
Gentlemen, Mr. Duran, you are up next. The witnesses are being quite forthcoming.
I'm in the phone book.
Ms. McClymouth is answering questions. Okay, gentlemen.
They do in Nova Scotia.
Okay,
It tells
Mr.
you how much
Perkins,
you
you're
know
not
about this
helping as
country.
well, Mr. Perkins. The floor is going to be yours in a second. I'm going to turn it back over. You have a little bit of time left, and then we'll go to Mr. Duran. But the witness is not being maltreated here, is responding to the best of her ability, in my opinion, is being as forthcoming. And I recognize Mr. Perkins is probing, which is his right to do. So, Mr. Perkins, I don't know if you want me to go right to the witness, because you've only got about 20 seconds left, or do you want a little bit of time? All right, you've got time to finish your questions, and then we'll hear from the witness. Thank you.
Will you table with this committee the person in PCO and PMO that sent out the order to say redact the documents on these two acts? Could you table that name with this committee, please, at some point?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me. I wasn't prepared to speak to that today, but we will go back and check with our colleagues and do our best to get it to the committee as quickly as possible.
The same thing she said last time. We'll do our best.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, we have professional civil servants here who are able to answer our questions. I think if we pose the questions in a manner that is respectful, even if they're tough, we should allow them to answer. Mr. Duran, you have the floor now for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly agree we have professional public servants here. My issue is that they are brought here for a reason, and then we suddenly go on a wild goose chase, which Mr. Perkins knows very well, because he was appointed on February 21st, 2008, as a GIC to the Business Development Bank of Canada. And I would ask PCO, is it normal to release personal information of individuals who have been appointed to various boards of the government when they are labeled as GICs?
What?
Pardon me. Mr. Perkins, until the end of yours, the room was quiet for you. I would ask you to extend the same
Mr.
courtesy.
Perkins doesn't
I would
like the
ask
truth.
Mr. Duran, please.
It's my time, isn't it?
I have paused the clock, so as I do, but there's no point in you two winding each other up, because it won't end well for the interpreters, as well as our time here. Mr. Duran, you have 5 minutes, 30 seconds left. I'm beginning the clock again.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening comments, absolutely, I think we do everything we can as stewards in the public service to protect the information that's provided to us, particularly in our line of business. As I mentioned at the outset, we respect the Privacy Act, and I think when somebody applies for a GIC position, they would absolutely expect that would be respected. But it's an HR management practice. If people are going to apply for positions, they will expect that their information is going to be held in strictest confidence.
So if I was to table a motion today asking for Mr. Perkins' personal information because he was appointed by the government, Conservative government, back in 2008, and we know his history. We know he worked for Brian Mulroney, a Conservative Prime Minister. Obviously, PCO would still redact his personal information. Is that? And I don't want to put you in a partisan position, but that would be the normal practice for anybody who's been appointed to a governor and council position, correct?
Mr. Chair, the member's correct. Whoever applies, their personal information would be protected under the Privacy Act. Yes, that's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm listening to my honourable colleagues on the other side, and I respect the process that we're in here today, and I'm questioning, these people were before a committee not too long ago. Why are they here again today? I'm still trying to figure out what the opposition is trying to get out of these witnesses, and knowing full well that the appointment that was made has the same relationship and had the same objective as Mr. Perkins had, which they both donated to a Conservative leader, potential leader contestant. And the idea that this is a green slush fund with a bunch of liberals is idiotic. Is idiotic. C'est niaiseux. C'est stupide.
Crazy.
Puis M. Perkins, qui s'en va maintenant, veut même plus écouter, se lève de la table, il s'en
And Mr. Perkins, who's leaving now.
écouter les réponses.
Okay,
Mais la réalité, c'est que lui-même a été...
Mr. Perkins doesn't want to listen to my answers.
Mr. Perkins, has to go? That's good. Very good. You can, yes, thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Duran, I have paused the clock. Thank you. Mr. Perkins. Mr. Duran, you have the floor again, just over 3 minutes.
J'aime pas ça parler dans le dos des députés.
I don't like speaking to the back of MPs who are leaving, but with all due respect, I think that this exercise here becomes an exercise where we won't be able to find the truth. The opposition MPs know very well, but the reason why in the House of Commons that the issue of privilege where they are doing a parliamentary filibuster is because Parliament has to give the documents to the RCMP, and we learned that. We heard it loud and clear, not only from several MPs in the House, but from the very mouth of the RCMP commissioner, and I have a problem with that. So today, these dear ladies who are here, but we hear that without saying who said it. We heard that a person who did not apply might be suddenly appointed onto a board or something. So I would like to know, before the government decide who goes onto a board, they have to apply, I imagine.
Chair, the member is right. In the current construct, this government has chosen to create an open and transparent and merit-based application process for all governor and council appointees, which means that we have a portal. Folks apply through that portal through opportunities. They are assessed. Ministers are provided with advice of qualified candidates, and it's to the minister to choose and put a recommended name forward for the position. It is ultimately the Prime Minister and the Minister in question's prerogative in terms of who they choose to appoint for the position, and other governments in the past have taken different approaches in terms of using processes or not, to the member's point, of appointing candidates to positions.
Donc, juste encore une fois.
So, again, nobody can be appointed by chance, even if a minister had a conversation or something about a possible appointment. So it's not because a minister or an MP or anyone would have a conversation and say, oh, you would be a good candidate. Maybe you can sit on that board, that public board. It doesn't mean that that person would be appointed in principle, because they have to go through a verification. And what is that process within the Privy Council office?
Question. It is quite possible. A minister could make a recommendation directly to the governor and council, and it could be approved without a process. That is possible. It would be up to the government to decide if that's how they wanted to run their appointment system. This government has chosen to do it on the basis of an open merit-based process. So in the current construct, to the member's question, you have to go through an appointment process in order to be appointed, but that really is ultimately up to the Prime Minister in terms of how they want to structure the appointment system. Currently, as I said, you apply through a portal. We have opportunities. You could go on our website right now and see those opportunities. You would apply. If you meet the qualifications and you're screened in, you would get invited to an interview. We would interview you. We would do a selection committee made up of the Privy Council office, the Prime Minister's office, the department in question, and the Minister's office would interview candidates, and recommended candidates would go forward for reference checks and would ultimately end up on an advice letter to a minister.
Thank you.
If the minister...
I'm going to stop you there.
Yep,
We're a little
good.
over, but I'm sure we'll come back to this.
Okay.
But I appreciate your explaining the system to us. Thank you. Suivant, c'est Madame Cycle Desgagnés pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I am relieved to hear that the appointments were merit-based, because what would it have been like if they hadn't been? So I have many questions. I'm going to go into the heart of the matter. Did the Privy Council learn about Raymond Chabot-Grant Thornton's report?
Aware of the report, yes.
Avez-vous été...
Were you aware of the preliminary conclusions of that report, those that were filed at the end of May, beginning of June 2023?
Mr. Chair, to the member's question, yes, we were kept apprised. I was kept apprised directly by the Deputy Minister of the report, the work that was being undertaken, led by ISED at the time. We were kept apprised in the context of the fact that there were Governor and Council appointees on the foundation, and if there were fundamentally questions of issues of their conduct, then it would have been to us to make advice to the Governor and Council in terms of consequences or actions related to conduct.
Merci beaucoup. Quand on regarde la...
Thank you very much. If we look at the chronology of people quitting, we hear of that, several that happened shortly after CGT's report being filed, 27th of September, before 27th of September, but before the Auditor General's report. So why were all these people leaving? Did you have conversations with the board?
Mr. Chair, I personally did not have any conversations with the board members. I'm well aware that they resigned from their positions, but I was not in contact with any of them over the course of their appointment.
Vous témoignez ici au nom du Conseil privé.
You're now testifying for the Privy Council. So you're saying that, generally speaking, the Privy Council was not involved in these conversations, was not aware of conversations that might have happened, either between PCO and members of the board, or between the members of ISED rather. So there were serious allegations that were noted in the Raymond Chabot's preliminary report.
I'm not aware of any conversations that would have transpired. If I had had any conversations with my colleague, the Deputy Minister at ISED at the time, it would have been to underscore to be cautious in conversations with any members on the organization, because they were appointed at good behavior tenure. Which means that it was a very high bar for removal from them from office. So that is a standard comment that I would give to any of my colleagues engaging with good behavior appointees, that we need to be cautious in conversations that we would have with them. But that would have been the extent if I had had any. I don't recall, and I certainly don't have any notes to that effect of conversations along the lines of the members' inquiry.
Merci.
Thank you. So knowing that you've just mentioned that the standards are quite high in terms of behavior, between the preliminary report by Raymond Chabot at the end of May 2023 and their resigning practically 7 months later, there was quite a lot of time where these members could approve new projects and promote some of their interests. How is it that PCO did not intervene sooner?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the question from the member, and I know that I would say my colleagues at ISED moved as quickly as I would count as humanly possible to advance the report from RCGT and to provide advice to the minister. From our perspective, as I said, it is a very high bar to remove good behavior appointees. It means that you have to prove cause. And this is why we were watching the circumstances very closely, because if there was a bar for cause, we would have pursued that for sure. Unfortunately, the circumstances are such that the individuals resigned and the investigation unfolded as it did.
C'est quand même très...
So it's quite surprising that you're saying that you have to prove it. The Ethics Commissioner said that quite quickly that Ms. Verschuren was guilty of major conflicts of interest. Many people were aware. The preliminary conclusions of the RCGT reports was clear. There were serious problems. So you're saying that the Privy Council, that's responsible for the appointment of these people, not only was aware, but that in addition, you let them leave of their own volition 7, 8, 9 months later, instead of opening an investigation or acting quickly. I'm sorry, but 9 months, it's how long it takes to grow a baby in a womb. So I had a few children. I know what it's like. It's a long time.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the member's question and the desire to see rapid action in these set of circumstances. I would just reiterate, earlier when we appeared previously, we talked about the construct of this foundation and that they were good behavior appointments. As I said, you have to prove cause. That's set out in the legislation. And that can be very, very challenging to do. You need a lot of facts and you need a lot of evidence. And that was, quite frankly, part of the reason why fact-finding was being undertaken, to make sure that we had all of the information. And so to the member's question about additional investigations, I think our expectation was that we would get to the facts through the RCGT report and that we would take whatever action was necessary at that time. And I would say that ultimately that's what our colleagues did. They put forward advice, and we see that there was a change in the structure and that the individuals that had been part of the board resigned. So I do think, I take the member's point, but I do think at the end of the day there was resolution, and quick resolution as far as I'm concerned. I have seen reports take much longer than this. I think we all did our best to move as quickly as possible in the circumstances.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup. Suivant, c'est M. Boulris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boulris. Now, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair.
Oh, this guy. Haven't seen him on committee for a while.
Thank you for being here with us today to answer these important questions that have been raised for several weeks and that have caused quite a bit of stirring up in the political way. And we're trying to clear up the situation and to better understand things. The questions I want to ask are as to asking, did Privy Council do the necessary checks during the selection process, or was it based on good faith and the word of the people who were applying? There's quite a difference between both. So, Ms. McClimmon, when you appeared before the committee on December 5th, my colleague, Mr. Desjardins, asked you some questions as to how conflicts of interest how you navigate through these issues during the selection process. And you said,
a very detailed paragraph sends candidates to the website of the Commissioner. It goes through the obligations for candidates, if they wish to apply, of how they have to adhere to the Act. Comment vous vous assurez que la personne qui applique...
How do you ensure that the person who's applying has read these definitions and has understood them?
Mr. Chair, it's an excellent question that the member raises. So as I said at my last appearance, yes, it's posted on our website. It's very clear on our website, and our expectation is that individuals will pay close attention to that. I mentioned last time that there's about 5 touch points where from the notice of opportunity all the way through to appointment, where we ensure that individuals are made aware of their obligations under the Act if they are to become a Governor and Council appointee. What I would say to respond to the member's question is that we are trying to beef this up, I would say, and we are asking more probing questions throughout the course of the interactions with candidates to get to the heart of what the member is asking, to make sure they've not only read it, but they understand it. And we do that ultimately in the interview itself, where we have a conversation at the end. And I can tell you I'm doing an interview process right now for a very senior level position, and I'm asking the candidates several times, not just once. And I think that will be the lesson that we will take from this, is to make sure that they don't just read it, but they understand it. Mm-hmm. And we will work with the Ethics Commissioner's Office to that end.
Merci.
Thank you. What's good is that your answers you're giving now are completely consistent with the answers you gave us last time. It allows me to go further, because last time you said something very similar to what you've just said.
Ask the candidates point blank if they have any real or perceived conflicts in relation to serving in that role. OK. Ce qui m'amène à une question. Pas juste s'ils l'ont lu la définition.
Brings me to a question, not if they just read the definition. or if they've understood the difference between conflict of interest and the appearance of a conflict of interest, which is a gray zone and can be interpreted in many ways. How do you make sure that they understand this nuance of what is a appearance of a conflict of interest that we had in preceding governments? That's often been a problem, the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Mr. Chair, it's an excellent question that the member asks, and I would say that the previous Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, he raised this as a challenge, that the Act talks about real conflicts and perception is really for individuals to manage. So it is, we don't try to lead candidates, but if candidates flag anything for us that we have concerns with, as was done in the case with Ms. Verschuren, we refer them to the Commissioner's office, and we make sure that they've had the opportunity to talk that through with the office. But to your point, if they give us examples, and we do emphasize perceived as well and not just an actual conflict, but I would say it is part of our constant improvement, and we will give more consideration to that. It's a very good point.
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
You have more time. 90 minutes? No, seconds, I'm sorry.
New members.
Dans le cas de Madame...
In the case of Ms. Verschuren, did you push her to, did you check if she understood what it was? What's a conflict of interest? What's a perceived conflict of interest? And you're saying that it's a merit-based appointment. What were Ms. Verschuren's merits when she had these so many conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest?
We have previously, but I would just say again that in that set of circumstances, I did say before, and I would say again, it was a best practice that she was referred to the office. The Ethics Commissioner report talks about the fact that she spent a fair amount of time with the office going through her personal circumstances to make sure that she would be aligned with the legislation and could have mitigation measures put in place for her conflict of interest measures. As we've talked about here, and I know the Ethics Commissioner was here earlier in the week, and he and his office emphasized, and I would just emphasize again that I do think unfortunately all the tools were in place to protect the board members. They just unfortunately were not adhered to, and they actually did not get very good legal advice. And we do warn candidates, and I would say it again here, that ultimately the Ethics Commissioner is the adjudicator and the administrator of the Act and has final word on conflicts of interest. And that's where they should have gone to get any source of nuance in terms of how to deal with some of the issues that they were facing as board members, not outside legal counsel.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup. Suivant, beginning our second round, Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
Told you, Mr. Cooper. All right, let's get it.
A motion adopted by this committee ordered the production of all communications between the PCO and then Minister Baines' office, the Prime Minister's office, and the Department of Industry respecting the appointment of Annette Verschuren as the chair of the Green Slush Fund. In response to that order, you wrote to the committee on behalf of PCO indicating that aside from one document that is being hid by the Trudeau government from this committee on the basis of cabinet confidence, no communications can be found. How is that possible?
Mr. Chair, it's a fair question for the member to ask. We did go carefully through the documents. We had nothing on hand. I myself was in Rima's position, Ms. Hamwey's position at the time of the appointment, and I have racked my own brain to make sure that there's nothing more that we could share with the committee, but it is, we do not have any records. I would, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
What? Through you, Mr. Chair, with the greatest respect, I find it incredible that we have an appointment, a government appointment, of the chair who is responsible for overseeing $1 billion taxpayer dollars, and the position of the PCO, the Prime Minister's Department, is that not a single communication, other than one, so not even an email, can be traced in the PCO, the Prime Minister's office, the Department of Industry, and former Minister Baines's department and office. I have a real tough time accepting that.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned at the outset, we've provided all of the documents that we have. The advice letters are the final records that we keep of the deliberations of the selection committee and the advice provided to the minister. And we do not maintain other documents. We do
Not a single email that can be found in anyone's inbox in the Prime Minister's office, the Department of Industry, former Minister Baines's office, not even a single email. And I'll tell you, I've got to say, for you, Mr. Chair, that why I'm having more difficulty accepting that answer is based upon the news of today, in which Blacklock's reported this morning that an IT official in Justin Trudeau's government deleted emails and texts relating to Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam. In other words, the Trudeau government was willfully destroying evidence to cover up Arrive scam. And now we have another Liberal corruption scandal involving $400 million that improperly went out the door during Ms. Verscheren's tenure as chair of SDTC. And this committee is trying to get to the bottom of why former Liberal Minister Navdeep
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Oh, we haven't had a Khalid point of order yet.
He's making false accusations.
Mr.
The member knows that it's a conservative member who made donations.
This is not a point of order.
It's a conservative member who made donations.
Mr.
It's a conservative member who made donations. I just want to point out the record. Well, the truth is important, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Duran, and this
the truth is important.
We go back and forth, and hopefully at the end of this process, we do get to the truth. But your member is up next in about 2 minutes. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
This committee is trying to get to the bottom of why former Liberal Minister Navdeep Baines appointed Ms. Verscheren as chair of SDTC, notwithstanding the fact that she had blatant conflicts of interest, and he knew about those conflicts of interest. And now all of a sudden, there's no records, no communications that can be found? How convenient.
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that we have done our best to provide not just the documentation that we have, but to be as forthcoming as we can be to find the right balance, to support the committee in its work by redacting personal information, but giving the minutes of the committee meetings and the outcomes of the reference checks. All of that information was provided to the committee, and we took the exceptional measure of seeking Ms. Verscheren's approval and consulting the Privacy Commissioner to provide as much detail as we could.
With the greatest of respect, Mr. Chair, is that if, in fact, there are no emails, no communications whatsoever that can be found, it demonstrates that Ms. Verscheren's appointment was cooked up by Minister Baines to see that Justin Trudeau's preferred candidate was put in place. It demonstrates that the process, there was no process. It was cooked up by Minister Baines. It was a sham to get this conflict-ridden person, Ms. Verscheren, who was receiving $12 million in funding from SDTC at the time of her appointment. It's a disgrace.
Thank you very much. Up next with Ms. Yip for 5 minutes, please.
No, not Ms. Yippity Yip Yip Yip.
Thank you for coming. We are rather spirited today. Would you like to respond back to Mr. Cooper's assertion that he just made right now? And I'm sure we'd all like to hear the truth.
Mr. Chair, I would say that it is pretty standard that we wouldn't have emails back and forth with the Minister's office or the Prime Minister's office. The deliberations of the committee, as I mentioned, the selection committee, are held in the advice letters, and we have provided that. And it would not be standard for us to be privy to any kind of conversations that would happen at the political level in relation to an appointment. So we would not have emails between the Prime Minister's office or the Minister's office or be privy to any of those discussions. So I do feel that we have done our utmost to provide as much information as possible to support the committee in its study while doing our best to respect the individual's privacy and the Access to Information and Privacy Acts.
Thank you for clearing that up. Now, I'd like to ask you, you were unable to provide this committee with board minutes from the selection committee that considered the Verchuren appointment, citing that these records were transitory in nature and were disposed of once an appointment was made. Your letter to this committee states that the official records of deliberations are reflected in the advice letter and candidate summaries. I'm wondering if you could speak to this.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, the selection committees are like an interview board. So we take notes on the interview as it transacts, and we have individuals that are on staff who serve as scribes, and they take that information from the selection committee and they put it into the advice letter. So ostensibly what you have are the minutes of the selection committee, the final formal document. We do between 30 and 60 processes a year. We interview between 5,000 and 10,000 people. We cannot, under the Privacy Act, hold that level of information on every single person from every single interview. So we do try to keep good records in terms of the final documents being the advice letter.
Could you just elaborate what advice letters are? Who do they go to?
Oh my God, Yip, come on.
What constitutes as advice?
You don't know what an advice letter is?
Mr. Chair, the advice letters, and you have those in front of you, and so you would see that it's an overview of the process itself, when it was launched, how many people applied, what the diversity stats are, what kind of backgrounds in terms of ethnocultural diversity, linguistic diversity, and then we provide an annex to the minister that explains how many qualified candidates there were, and a snapshot of each candidate. And so it is a summary of the interview itself, a summary of the reference checks, and sometimes, not in this case, but in some cases for senior leadership positions, we will do a psychometric assessment, which will provide information from a psychologist regarding the person's aptitude and abilities to serve in the role. So you can see that that is very sensitive information that we hold, and that sometimes the people, the candidates themselves don't even have this information about themselves that we hold. So you can see why we feel very strongly that it's very important that we do everything humanly possible to protect that.
And in your selection, were you able to meet the diversity standards?
Mr. Chair, this is a good question. Our goal is the government's goal is to try to increase diversity across ethnocultural equity-seeking groups. I would say over the course of the government's tenure, they have done quite a good job, I would say, in increasing diversity. We are at about gender parity in terms of positions across the governor and council community. We are at about 17% visible minorities, 6% persons with disabilities, 8% Indigenous Canadians. So quite good in terms of the representation across the GIC community. I would say in this particular case, the legislation actually requires specifically that the board is representative of men and women. So that absolutely would have been a goal of the selection committee at the time, to make sure that they had men and women represented, as well as a cross-section from individuals across the country, which was also a requirement under the SDTC Foundation legislation.
At your last appearance, you stated there were no faults in the Verchuren appointments process, that the process was followed closely. You've also previously stated that it's not uncommon for there to be conflicts with appointees, and that in such cases you refer them to the Ethics Commissioner's office. In the case of Ms. Verchuren, this was done, right? Is that right? Okay. Is it the appointee's responsibility?
I'm going to cut you off there. I know that was a very short question, but you are over your time, and so we'll certainly come back to you, I believe.
She's going to put me to sleep.
Up next, encore, c'est Madame Sinclair-Dengagé pour 2 minutes 30 secondes. Je vais aussi ajouter
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
I don't know how to say her last name. No, she usually asks good questions sometimes. Sometimes she's a bit off, but she's been good today.
Because of the interpretation. Thank you, Chair. So
Sinclair
we'll come back to the members of the board.
I said that right, I think.
Ms. Verchuren resigned on December 1st, 2023, Jill Earthy, January 2024, Aaron Mulroney, May 2024, and Mr. Ouimet, June 3rd, 2024, about a year after the first version of Raymond Chabot. So you mentioned earlier that you advised the Minister of ISET, or the department, to be prudent in their conversations. Could you give us more details? Because they all resigned, so we know that there were conversations, there were sensitive issues that must have been discussed. Do you have more information about that? Were you in the loop?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that good behavior appointees are afforded a certain degree of independence from government, and as I said, they can only be removed for cause. And so you see those often in organizations like the Immigration Refugee Board, for example. Those members they have to be protected because they're making tough decisions, and they need to know that they can make those decisions without any fear of reprisal or removal for making those decisions.
Okay. Juste une petite question rapide. Êtes-vous en train de dire que ces membres du conseil d'administration n'avaient...
Are you saying that the members of the board had no reason to be expelled or removed?
So, Mr. Chair, the point I'm trying to make is to draw a parallel. They had the same stature as somebody in a tribunal. They were good behavior appointees to be fully independent from government. That was the decision that was taken at the time that the legislation was passed by Parliament. It is a very unusual construct.
Mon temps est limité.
I have limited time. So you're telling me that you didn't have sufficient cause to remove them. So these were difficult conversations that took place and led them eventually to resign, because they all did. So there were conversations that pushed them to leave. What can you tell us about those conversations?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that when I am talking to any of my colleagues who are dealing with good behavior appointees, I always caution them to be very careful. The bar to remove someone for cause is very high.
D'accord, mais on parle pas de renvoi, là, on parle de, ce sont des démissions.
So
what
we're
do
not
you mean?
talking about
It's very high.
Being removed, but resignations. They all resigned. They all must have had reasons to resign, and there were conversations that took place to push them to resign. So what do you know about those conversations?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that I am not privy to any kind of conversations that would have happened with any of the members. And if I had been in any kind of discussions, like I said, with any deputy or any colleague who's dealing with good behavior appointees, they have to proceed with prudence. If we wanted to have removed these board members, we would have had to have a very solid case for cause. And as I said, that bar is very high. It's usually a demonstration of things like fraud, mismanagement of funds, and we would have had to have quite a detailed dossier in order to be able to do that.
Et voilà. Suivant, c'est M. Brice. Vous aussi avez...
Here we are. Now we have Mr. Boulris. You have 3 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. So during the last round, I asked you some questions, and you said something to Ms. McClimmon, rather, that intrigued me, and I want to be sure I understand. You said the people on the board disposed of all the tools necessary to do their work. However, they would have received poor legal advice. What did you mean?
Mr. Chair, I was referring back to the Ethics Commissioner's report, where he did actually a postscript where he said it is an unfortunate set of circumstances where poor advice, legal advice was provided. The issue turned on the fact that the legal advice had advised many of the board members that they did not need to formally recuse from decisions, but to abstain, which meant that they did not remove themselves from the room. And the Conflict of Interest Act requires, for individuals who are required to recuse, that they must remove themselves from the room. It's not good enough to abstain. And that was the poor legal advice that they received, which was the foundations of why he leveled his decisions against Ms. Verschuren.
Et de qui ils ont reçu ces conseils juridiques? Ça venait de l'extérieur? L'extérieur, c'est qui?
And who did they get this legal advice from? Was it from outside sources? Who was?
So I'm not a super great expert in terms of the structure of SDTC, but just going on the Ethics Commissioner's report, they had outside counsel that supported the board, and it was that individual, Mr. Chair, who provided the advice to the board members.
Et comment on peut s'assurer que cela ne se reproduise pas?
And how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again?
This is a fundamental question going forward. I have spoken to the Ethics Commissioner about this, and I think it's going to be very important to ensure that individuals understand, not just up front, like we talked about in the appointments process, which is obviously our responsibility, but the Ethics Commissioner being the guardian of the legislation to make sure that people adhere over the life of their appointment will be something that we will continue to discuss in terms of trying to educate and inform Governor and Council appointees of their obligations.
45 secondes.
Parfait.
During the selection process and the appointment that happened to the person we know, do you have tools to check the veracity of the answers of the people who say, yes, I read this, yes, I understood, no, I don't have any perceived conflict of interest? Do you rely on their word, or do you have methods for checking the veracity of their statements?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, our job is to make sure people are made aware, and it's ultimately the Ethics Commissioner's responsibility to administer and adjudicate the legislation. So I would just reiterate the fact that in the circumstances surrounding Ms. Verschuren's appointment, I do think that that was a best practice, that she was referred to the Commissioner's office, she spoke to the office, and they went in detail, had a detailed conversation according to the Ethics Commissioner's report, where they went through the kind of conversation that the member is referring to make sure that they kind of deconstructed her obligations under the legislation against her personal circumstances. So absolutely, I think that that is important, but it is really the remit of the Ethics Commissioner.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Suivant, Mr.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
for joining us. Ms. McClement, I want to start with you. Am I correct, you've worked at the Privy Council office for about 20 years, or at least 20 years?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Tomorrow, actually, I will have 30 years in the government. So I started in 1994 at the Department of Canadian Heritage as a management trainee, and I joined the Privy Council office working in plans and priorities in 2003.
So congratulations on nearly 30 years. That's an excellent accomplishment. So you are very familiar with government and how government operates and your duties as a public servant. First of all, to whom do you report currently in your current position?
I'm the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet for Senior Personnel and Public Service Renewal. I was appointed on the recommendation of the Prime Minister in 2021, and I report through the Clerk of the Privy Council office.
And did you discuss with the clerk your testimony today?
I certainly gave the clerk a heads up in terms of how I was going to approach things, some of the questions that we thought would be anticipated, and how best to support the committee in their deliberations.
So this is getting to where my concerns are. You are a 30-year public servant. You report directly to the clerk of the Privy Council, but yet the actions that you and your office have undertaken are actually contrary to the Constitution. You came here today and you said in response to previous questions that you withheld information from Parliament, that you redacted information that Parliament has the constitutional authority to request. Do you accept that Parliament has the constitutional authority to call for documents without redactions?
I was waiting for someone to ask this.
Mr. Chair, I understand very well, and I'm following very closely as a student of public policy the debate that's actively going on. I would reiterate my opening comments that we are responsible as public servants, and that this is an active debate that goes well beyond me and my responsibilities. I understand the law clerk's position and the opposition's position, but I also am bound and swore an oath when I took office as a public servant that I would respect the laws that we are bound by, and we are bound by.
I'm going to interrupt you, though, but you also, as part of that oath, part of the oath we all take as parliamentarians is to respect the Constitution. And the Constitution provides Parliament with the unfettered authority to call for documents. This is laid out very clearly. Beauchesne says very clearly, committees may send for any papers that are relevant to their orders of reference. Within this restriction, it appears that the power of the committee to send for papers is unlimited. The law clerk has been very clear. Boskin Gagnon is very clear. This helpful document here, based on principles firmly established in constitutional parliamentary law, and it goes on to say, a house of a committee has the full authority to summon and compel the attendance and testimony of any person and to summon and compel the production of any document. It's very clear. There's no gray matter here. It's very clear. Parliament has the authority to request documents unredacted. But here we have 100 and some odd pages with heavy redactions that are unconstitutionally made because Parliament has the authority to call for these documents. It's very clear. Do you accept that Parliament has this authority, or is the position of the Privy Council office that you are above the Constitution and you have the authority to black out information rather than provide the information duly requested by a committee? Is that the position of the Privy Council office?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate it has been the position of consecutive governments that the application of the laws that Parliament passes have to be respected in the production of documents, and that is what we have done here. We have protected information under the Privacy Act, solicitor-client privilege, cabinet confidences, and sensitive business information. That's our obligation under the law as public servants.
I would make it very clear. There are clear examples within this very Parliament, within this the 44th Parliament, where committees have ordered and individuals have produced documents that even violate solicitor-client privilege. This power is higher than solicitor-client privilege, and yet the Privy Council office says that you are above the Constitution. I find that wholly unacceptable when Parliament as a whole, Parliament as the House of Commons and these committees passed information, and yet you've taken it upon yourself as the Privy Council office to block that information that has been duly requested. I think it's highly troubling that this is the position that PCO has taken.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
That's the first thing I thought.
Now to Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I just have a couple of initial questions to just kind of clarify the GIC appointments. Ms. Verschuren has been appointed in positions of consequence by both Liberal and Conservative governments. She was appointed by former Prime Minister Mulroney to a Science and Tech Council back in the 90s. I'm wondering if a PM appointment of that sort would be considered a GIC appointment.
Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with that appointment. It could have been. There is a provision under the Public Service Employment Act that allows for ministerial appointments, and so the Prime Minister could have used that power at the time. There are other vehicles for appointments. I'm not familiar with that one, but it is absolutely possible.
Now, Ms. Verschuren was also appointed by former Finance Minister Flaherty to serve as an economic advisor on his Economic Council at the height of the 2008 recession. Would that type of position have been a GIC appointed position, in your opinion?
Again, Mr. Chair, it would depend on the vehicle that was used at the time. I'm not familiar. Some ministers actually have authority under their legislation. I'm not sure if finance does off the top of my head, but they can make their own, ministers can make their own appointments. But it is possible, again, to use the provision under the Public Service Employment Act I was referring to appoint ministerial advisors, and so that could have been a vehicle. There are occasions where individuals just serve, on a pro bono basis as advisors, that there is no formal appointment mechanism. There are different mechanisms, but I'm not sure exactly which one would have been used, but it is possible, absolutely, to the member's question, that it could have been a GIC appointment.
Can you check into those two incidences, please, and get back to us in writing what you find?
We could, yeah.
Can you speak to Ms. Andrea Lee's Mathot's appointment to the SDTC Board of Directors? I believe she was appointed back in 2016, so you were definitely around at that time. Was she a GIC appointee?
Mr. Chair, no. This individual was not appointed by the Governor and Council. As I said earlier, it was a very novel structure, the SDTC Foundation, and the members of the foundation actually appointed 8 of the directors, and she was one of those 8 directors appointed by the foundation itself.
Okay, so by the foundation, but not by the Board of Directors, or?
Well, by the members of the foundation through the legislative framework that allowed for the appointment of the other 8 directors on the board. That's how she was appointed.
Okay, so that should bring some clarity then to my Conservative colleagues. With respect to the redacting of documents, there's been much made about the documents that are being presented are being redacted. You've been a public servant for 30 years, and in the current department since 2003, I think you said, right? Under the previous government, prior to 2015, did you redact documents? Was it a common practice then to submit redacted documents?
Mr. Chair, over the course of my career, as the member refers to, I have worked on a lot of access to information and documents when we've provided them either for individual requests coming from outside or production of documents for parliamentary requests. And yes, I would have been responsible over the course of my career for reviewing documents, determining redactions, and making recommendations on redactions, 100%.
Because of personal privacy concerns, as you stated earlier.
Okay.
All of the key elements, the Access to Information Act, Privacy Act, Solicitor-Client Privilege, Cabinet Confidences. Quite frankly, a lot of my career was spent working on policy committees under this government, previous governments, and we would have redacted for Cabinet Confidence purposes. So I've seen it all, I guess.
She's going red because she knows what she's contradicting herself.
At the time, the same rules apply. Right?
She said before that she doesn't know who redacted the documents.
So how does PCO appointments deal with flagged conflicts of interest in an application? What do you do with this information, and what weight does it hold in any deliberations or PCO considerations?
Mr. Chair, when we see with an application somebody who may have a conflict, sometimes it's such that it's not going to be possible for the person to proceed. So we may just screen them out, quite frankly, if the conflict is seen to be insurmountable. But generally speaking, we have a conversation with the individual over the course of the appointments process. And as I said, it really is a best practice from our perspective for individuals pre-appointment to engage with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that either they will divest to have no conflicts, or that their solid mitigation strategies are put in place to ensure that they won't find themselves in a conflict over the course of their appointment.
Thank you. That is the time, Ms. Bradford, I'm afraid. Beginning our third round, I think, unless I hear otherwise from members, this will be our last full round of 6 minutes with various amounts of time. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Cooper, ask her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go through the steps that led to the appointment by former Liberal Minister Baines of Annette Verscheren as chair of SDTC. Is it correct that on March 15, 2019, PCO provided a short list of 5 recommended candidates for chair of SDTC to then former Liberal Minister Navdeep Baines?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And Ms. Verscheren was not on that list, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We know, based on the report of the Ethics Commissioner, that in April 2019, Minister Baines called Ms. Verscheren. Then, on April 30th, 2019, a month and a half after PCO had provided Minister Baines with a short list of 5 recommended candidates, Ms. Verscheren submitted an application. She was interviewed by the selection committee on May 14th, 2019. Correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And just to confirm, the selection committee was comprised of representatives from Minister Baines's office, the Prime Minister's office, as well as representatives from the Department of Industry and PCO, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then on May 21st, 2019, a second letter was sent by the PCO to Minister Baines, adding to the short list of recommended candidates with a 6th name, that being Ms. Verscheren, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And how many candidates did PCO interview between March 15th, 2019, when the short list of 5 recommended candidates was submitted to Minister Baines, and when PCO provided the second letter with Ms. Verscheren's name on May 21st, 2019?
So, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll just go through a few numbers. So for the March 15th letter, there would have been 54 applicants at that time.
My time is limited, and I
Right.
asked a very straightforward question, and I understand there were 54 candidates that applied in the fall of 2018. Ms. Verscheren wasn't one of them. There was a short list of 5. I'm asking how many were then interviewed between the letter with the 5 recommended candidates on March 15th and the second letter on May 21st, 2019, when Ms. Verscheren's name was added to the list.
Yes, I'm sorry. I see your question. So there would have been an additional 47 applicants. 16 were shortlisted, and 3 interviews were conducted for the May 21st, 2019 letter.
There were 47 additional applicants between March 15th and then.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, that's not correct. Between October of
No, I'm asking you, I just want to be very clear. I'm asking between March 15th, 2019 and May 21st, 2019.
Correct. So we reviewed applications, Mr. Chair, on
how many were submitted between that time? You had a short list. It was in the minister's possession for a month and a half. Then he calls Annette Verscheren and asks her to apply. She applies, she gets interviewed, she gets added to the list. How many other candidates did you interview, did the selection committee interview during that period?
We interviewed an additional 3 candidates.
And had they applied after March 15, 2019?
No, they applied after October 12, 2018.
They hadn't applied after March 15th. So Ms. Verscheren was the only candidate that applied after March 15th, 2019. And it just seems, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I would just clarify, and I apologize because I know it is confusing with all these different dates, but we reviewed applications on October 12, 2018, and we interviewed 8 individuals for that first batch for to March 15th, 2019. In that intervening period between October of 2018 and May 2nd of 2019, an additional 47 people applied. We shortlisted 16 and we interviewed 3.
And what was the last date that you provided?
May 2nd, 2019.
May 2nd, 2019. And of the candidates that were shortlisted, 6 candidates.
16 candidates were shortlisted.
Well, 6 candidates were made the final list to the minister.
Correct.
6,
Correct.
not 16. 6. How many of those, other than Ms. Verscheren, had conflicts of interest with SDTC?
Mr. Chair, I would apologize that that's going to be personal information, and I would not be able to provide details of the 5 other candidates and their personal circumstances. I would refer back to the fact that we did provide the summaries of each one of those individuals in terms of their candidacy through the selection committee review and the reference checks.
No. Make her answer.
Thank you very much. I believe we're back to Mr. Cooper, so I'll cut things off there. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Oh, no, not Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I really appreciate it. So I'll get right to it. So when a position becomes available and a PCO posting goes out, we call for candidates, what are the next steps for PCO? And does PCO habitually receive lists of relevant individuals from government departments? Do departments mass email stakeholders? How does it work?
Mr. Chair, so the question around outreach is a very important one. We are a pretty small shop, and we focus on the selection processes themselves and the appointment process. The outreach is really, in our view, the responsibility of the department and the minister's office, and ultimately the minister, to try to attract and find the best candidates. So you're right, there's lots of different vehicles that can be used, mass mailouts, and I would say to the committee, it is not unheard of for the minister's office, the prime minister's office, or even the minister to make outreach connections with potential candidates who are qualified for the positions to encourage them to apply. That is absolutely part of the open process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So when the posting for the chair position was posted in September of 2018, what happened next? Did the department provide you with names? Did PCO do any outreach to potential candidates? What exactly happened there?
Mr. Chair, we would not have done the outreach. It would have been really to the department, the minister's office, and the minister to do the outreach to try to attract candidates. They would have applied through our portal. We would have looked at the portal on October 12th, 2018 to see who was in there. We would have assessed who was eligible, and then we would have ran interviews. It is not uncommon. We do not close the processes until an appointment is made. So it is not uncommon for us to provide advice to the minister and to look into the portal after the fact and find that potentially some very good candidates have applied, and we will do a second pass of interviews until an appointment is made. And our goal there is to make sure that we're providing the best advice to the minister and ultimately the Prime Minister and Cabinet of the most qualified candidates for the position.
You just said you had no communication with
that,
the PMO
but
office.
It did take over a year to fill the chairperson position for this role. Are these usual timelines? And did PCO have any difficulty in finding candidates in this instance? Like, why did it take so long?
I'd love to ask her some
Mr.
questions
Chair, I
in
would
this
say
committee.
that this bedevils me constantly. I would like things to go more quickly. We all would. We do our best. It gets complicated when you're trying to schedule, when you're trying to attract good people to the members' question. It is sometimes hard to find good people. I do worry it gets harder, not easier. In the current context where, you know, media charged, focused, it's hard to attract really qualified people for some of these positions. And then it's hard to get selection committee members together, coordinating sometimes with deputy ministers, their schedules. I'm not trying to make excuses, but it is hard to keep the machine moving. And so we, as the member points out, is this a standard? Yes, it can take us anywhere from 6 months to a year to find good people, run a selection process, have a minister make a decision and make an appointment. And we're very clear about that on our website. And so it can take time. It can take time to find good people and make the decisions and get those good people into place.
And lastly, I'll ask you, why do you think you're here today?
I feel that we're here today to provide some important clarification. As Mr. Perkins said, there seemed to be a bit of confusion around Ms. Verschuren's appointment, and I do think it's important for the committee's work to understand that there was an application, there was a process by which she went through, and that she was recommended ultimately by the minister, and we're very happy to come and give those explanations to the committee for their important work.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair pour 3 minutes.
Next person is Ms. Sinclair Gagné for 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. So if we look at the chronology of events, so Raymond Chabot publishes its preliminary report in May 2023. So you learned the preliminary conclusions that were quite devastating. But nothing happened between May and September when the final report was tabled. And then nothing happened until October, where the Auditor General announced that she was undertaking a study. And that study, as opposed to Raymond Chabot's, was going to be public. And that's when the resignations started. And all these resignations took place between the announcement that the Auditor General was going to write a report and the day of filing the report. So it was the CEO who resigned first in May until the last resignation by Mr. Ouimet the night before that report was published. So I'm wondering if basically people waited until there was an announcement that there would be a public report written in order to resign, or did you never have the intention to make the decision to fire people, to remove people, and carry out investigations? Was it the Auditor General's report that precipitated things?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak for the motivations for the individuals in question and why they may have
Vous n'avez pas
chosen to
vu les lettres de
resign.
démission?
I'm sorry?
Did you see the letters of resignation?
Mr. Chair, I don't remember seeing them directly myself. We would have received them because any governor and council appointee who
Pourriez-vous
steps
nous
on
les fournir, s'il vous plaît? Pouvez-vous nous fournir les...
Could you provide us with those letters of resignations of the members of the board, please?
Mr. Chair, we'll check and see if it's possible to provide those letters. I will warn the committee. Unfortunately, they may fall and they may come back redacted, given potential personal information.
Enlever les adresses. Les adresses ne nous intéressent pas. Par contre, l'information sur le pourquoi.
Can remove addresses, but information on why they resigned would be very relevant to the study that we're undertaking, and I'd be very disappointed if the committee could not have access to these letters, knowing that they're at the heart of the study that we're undertaking.
What's in the realm of possible and what we have in our records that we can provide to the committee.
D'accord.
Encore 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Pour,
You have 30 seconds left. So to come to Mr. Ulrich's questions and to answer to what he was asking himself, it's the Osler, an associate of the Osler firm that gave the poor advice to Ms. Verschurens and who bears the blame. But we've learned from the current members of the board that this firm continued to offer advice to the board. Do you think that's normal?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't be in a position really to comment on that. I know that other witnesses have been here from the board who've given
Avez-vous vu les
explanations.
conclusions du rapport Osler?
Voilà, désolé.
J'ai juste la réponse, oui ou non?
No. If you want to provide...
Did you...
Yes, but, s'il vous plaît,
Merci.
répondez la question.
Did you see the conclusions of the Osler report and compared them to the Raymond Chabot report?
I personally have not, Mr. Chair, seen the Oslo report and had an opportunity to do a comparison. No,
Thank you very
I'm sorry,
much.
I haven't.
Suivant, c'est M. Boulderis pour 3 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Boulderis, you have 3 minutes.
All right, and then we should get a...
Thank you, Chair. And with the indulgence of the
Macaulay,
patience of the
Conservative.
witness, I would like to summarize the facts. Our Conservative documents are showing documents that are redacted or incomplete that might lack some information. They're angry about this, maybe with reason. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have to say that the end of Mr. Harper's mandate was marked by contempt of court. And it was the refusal of presenting documents to parliamentarians, documents that were talking about the cost of some measures and the buying of fighter jets and other issues. So I think it's quite ironic that a Conservative government of Stephen Harper was recognized guilty of contempt of court for having refused to give documents to parliamentarians. So I don't know if this is hypocrisy or lack of memory. But to come back to the witness, sorry about this digression, but I wanted to remind people of this. You said in your evidence in September that...
Of course, before the nomination or the appointment. C'est quoi ce one last check?
Mr. Chair, I would just note that...
What is this last check?
We send to candidates a confirmation of their terms and conditions of employment, and we do one last verification in writing to ensure that they have, as I said, it's part of our 5 touch points, and one last verification just to reiterate that it's important that they adhere to the obligations that they are held to under the Conflict of Interest Act.
Et peut-être une dernière question. À la fin de ce processus-là,
and maybe a last question at the end of that process, do people have to sign a document or swear that they will respect the act?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. We require that individuals attest that they will adhere to their obligations throughout the course of their appointment.
C'est tout. C'est tout? Très bien, merci beaucoup. Turning back to the official opposition, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, Macaulay. He's
Thanks,
good.
Mr. Chair. Thanks for some of your answers today. I just want to get back to a question that Mr. Perkins, I think, asked earlier. Who directed you to redact these documents?
That's exactly what I've been wanting to hear.
It didn't come on your own volition. We know very clearly that Parliament has a right to order these documents. So who ordered you to redact these documents?
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would say that
No, I'm not asking. You would say a straight question, straight answer. Who ordered you to redact these documents?
Mr. Chair, when a request comes in, either through the Access to Information Act or production of papers, central coordination within PCO will send out a request, and we are requested to comply with the request that's been presented, like I said, either under the ATI or production of parliamentary documents. And it would be...
Ms. McClintock, I'm going to interrupt you. This is not under the ATIP Act. It's not under the Privacy Act. It is a direct order from Parliament. We have unfettered access to records as long as those records exist in Canada. That is the law. The law clerk has stated as such. Parliament has ordered. Who directed you or someone else to redact these documents before sending them back to us? And it's not a group decision. It's not something in the ether. I would like the name of the person who directed you to redact those documents, please.
Mr. Chair, I would say it's the Access to Information Act that we rely on.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. The Access to Information Act is not a person. It did not all of a sudden become sentient and order you to redact those documents. What is the name of the person who ordered you to redact the documents?
Mr. Chair.
To present to committee,
Point of order.
please.
I'm just going to making assumption that somebody ordered. The witness is trying to explain how they go through the process, but won't let the witness finish the
not a point of
answer.
order.
I'm having a hard time understanding. If we wanted to get to the bottom of the truth, we must
That's
let
not
the
a point of
witness
order.
speak. Let the witness speak.
Mr. Durant, your side will be up in just a few short minutes. Mr. Well, it's
Sorry,
true.
Mr. Chair, we
Yes.
have to have an orderly debate. I don't care.
No, actually, Mr. Durant, this is not a debate time. This is
Exactly. When a member of Parliament asks a question, we have to let the witness answer. And
Mr.
we're not
Durant,
letting the
Mr.
witness
Durant,
answer. We keep
you are
interrupting.
wrong about that. This is
absolutely
this
no.
is,
I'm not
this
wrong.
is,
I've been
this
here for
is,
9 years. This is not how we
you've
operate
been wrong
on
for
committees.
9 years. This is the members' time, and that applies to your side as well as the opposition. To ask the witnesses to interrupt them, to refocus the question.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, are we opining on the witness's testimony, or do we want the answer? This is what I'm asking. Do you want the truth, or do you want members?
The truth. That's
we might as well not have witnesses if they're not able to answer.
Mr. Durant, I'm sorry you don't like the way the opposition asks questions, but they're entitled to ask it.
They're not asking questions. They're opining. They're asking a question and then keep interrupting.
That's your interpretation, and we give you the opportunity to ask questions your way and to ask the witnesses to
I don't interrupt the witness when they answer because
actually, Mr.
I have
Durant,
respect.
I think you interrupt people more than I think you realize.
I know, man.
Mr. McCauley, and again, what I see here, Mr. Durant, is every time you jump in and interrupt the officials here, it looks like you've got something to hide. The official is actually doing a job here.
You're on my opinion.
Well, I am, because you're sitting there doing the same thing to me.
Because I cannot listen to the witness. That's the point, Mr. Chair. If we are going to have an honest conversation here, we must let the witness answer the question.
Right. All right.
Simonek.
Well, except the opposition has got a great point that there are rights from Parliament that have not been respected. Mr. McCauley is trying to get to that very answer and trying to do so.
Point of order, Chair.
Mr. Durant, your side will have an opportunity
Point
for
of order,
5
Chair.
minutes.
Yes,
Ms.
decorum.
Oh, really? All right. Yes, Ms. Killeen.
Decorum.
Thank you
a good one, Francis.
very much, and I do have to say that there is a point to be made about decorum. And as chair, it is very difficult for members of all parties for us to digest your own opinions on this committee. As you know, Chair, and I respect you immensely, but being neutral, being nonpartisan on this committee is very important, and I really appreciate that my colleague has expressed his views, and I have said this time and time again, that when witnesses come before committees, they should be given the opportunity to respond to the questions that they are being asked. This is not an interrogation. This is not an opportunity to grasp whatever clips the opposition may want to fundraise off of tomorrow or today. This is, a fact-finding mission, as Monsieur Drouin clearly pointed out. So, Chair, I would really expect you to do your job as Chair, to be nonpartisan, and to ensure that there is decorum in how we operate as members and how we treat witnesses in this committee.
Tom would have cut you off at OJ.
Thank you.
Yeah, he would have.
Thank you thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Mr. McCauley. Again, as I've said, this time belongs to the members. Mr. McCauley has been respectfully asking just to pinch the question in a little bit more. Mr. Drouin, you're your own worst enemy here when you interrupt yourself. Ms. Khalid, I am equally hard on the Conservatives when they do the same. When they do, I stopped the meeting and waited for one Conservative member today because I was tired of him lobbying at your side. So if you weren't here for that,
Chair.
I'm
I've
sorry.
been on this committee for a year.
Mr. McCauley, you have the floor. Again, you've got just over 3 minutes.
Holding the information that the committee has ordered.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I quite understand the member's question. At the end of the day, we would have been the ones to determine the redactions within my group.
So PCO, and the Prime Minister is the Minister in charge of PCO. Again, I'll go back to the original question. Who ordered or directed these documents to be redacted?
Just
the name. It has to come from someone. It wasn't on its own. Who, please?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, there is a central coordinating unit within PCO who directs when we get requests for parliamentary documents, to prepare the documents, to respect the requests from the parliamentarians, and to apply the necessary legislation.
Walk me through the process. Did you receive this and then go to this central governing board? Did they provide it in writing? Was it a phone call, an email?
We normally get an email sent out at senior levels, so the email probably would have come to me directly or perhaps to Rima.
Would you provide that email to us, please, with the directions?
We can certainly have a look if we have that on hand, Mr. Chair, and we'll do our best to provide it as quickly as possible.
You mentioned on hand, and I'm greatly concerned. You mentioned other documents that you quoted, we don't keep documents. You repeatedly referred to the ATIP law, but government has very specific instructions on holding and keeping documents. And yet earlier you stated, when Mr. Cooper was asking, there was only one email about a specific subject. You stated, well, we didn't keep the records, we didn't keep documents. Are you following what is required on the Information Act or the ATIP Act on keeping records?
Mr. Chair, we absolutely hold the responsibility as good stewards, and information management is a top priority for me in our branch, and we absolutely take that responsibility very seriously. As I've mentioned to the committee, the selection committee processes are really like an interview panel where people take notes, and we use those notes as the final documents of the advice letter.
Those notes have to be kept, though. They are required to be kept. But you threw them out.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, they're handwritten notes, and they are considered transitory.
I'm sorry, handwritten notes are required under the ATIP Act to be kept. They're not to be thrown out. They're no different than texts or emails. They are required to be kept. Do you not see an issue here?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, the notes are used to formulate the final advice, and that is the final record. And that is the requirement in terms of our record keeping, of our obligations, both within the organization but also under the law, to keep a final record of the deliberations of the selection committee.
How much time, sir?
One last question, brief.
Just very quickly, just walk me through a simple, real easy one. The good behavior appointments, you said they have a very high bar for dismissal. I'm looking at the process for hiring. Everyone does have to sign off on the Governor Council Appointments Candidate Declaration Certification Form, which covers the ethical and political activity guidelines for public office holders. Very clearly, a lot of the directors violated that statute. Why is it so difficult to terminate them when they very clearly failed to follow the rules under the ethical and political activity guidelines for public office holders? I think they met a very high bar in violating these conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I'll allow the witness to answer.
Mr. Chair, it's a very fair question that the member asks. What is the bar for good behavior appointees? And as I've mentioned, I'm not a lawyer by training, but our lawyers have advised us that it's cause, and cause is generally where there is illegal activity or fraudulent activity, or to the member's point that a law has been broken. We would have to do an investigation and have a very solid dossier in order to remove someone. In this case, the individuals resigned before that course of action could have been taken.
Thank you very much. And our final member, Mr. Erskine Smith, joining us online. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Here's the guy. This is the guy who swore last time.
Two lines of attack from my opposition colleagues. And the first, just so I understand, is sort of some kind of alleged impropriety of in relation to Ms. Verschuren's appointment. And I guess what I want to get at is you said it's not unheard of. It strikes me as it makes eminent sense, but it's not unheard of for a minister or department to reach out to quality individuals to encourage them to apply for positions, right?
I don't know if I'm on here. Mr. Chair, that is absolutely correct. Yes, it's part of the outreach strategy, and the expectation is that the minister's office, the department, and in some cases the minister themselves will reach out to candidates to encourage them to apply.
Right. And in a particular case like this isn't a friend of the minister's, to our knowledge. I haven't seen any evidence to that effect.
Yes, there is evidence on that.
This is an individual who was the former head of Home Depot Canada, who started the Michaels store, who has a lengthy history in business. It's on any number of private sector boards, sat on boards appointed by the former Conservative government, the Harper government. Was there any reason to think, from PCO's perspective, that there was a problematic relationship with the then minister?
Mr. Chair, I would say for myself, when I do look at the candidacy on paper, it is very solid. To the member's question, this is an Order of Canada recipient, ran a number of businesses. To Ms. Bradshaw has also made the point that she was appointed by a number of other, in other capacities as serving in government. So it would seem, certainly on paper, as a candidate, that she would have been a very strong candidate. Absolutely.
Okay. And the application is submitted, and you and your team are responsible for reviewing that application. The PCO team is certainly responsible for reviewing it. Well, did PCO flag any concerns at all with Ms. Verschuren's candidacy?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't want to speak in terms of any kind of personal information we hold, but what I would say is that the Ethics Commissioner has been clear in his report that she was referred to his office and that there was a lengthy discussion. So I do think that is absolutely a best practice. And there are cases sometimes, as I've said, where the mitigation cannot be accomplished. And the individual cannot be appointed. This was not the view of the Ethics Commissioner's office in this set of circumstances, that if the rules for reporting or for public office holders had been adhered to in terms of recusal and the Act had been respected, I think that the Commissioner's office thought that this would be quite possible for her to serve in the chair role.
Because of her role and stake in NR Store, I assume. Okay, so the second line of inquiry is in relation to the disclosure of documents. And there are two questions that I have. One is in relation to, I'm going through the document, I see the redactions, and the redactions in many cases are obviously related to individuals that are not Ms. Verschuren. I mean, there are other people who are applying, and I've got no interest in that. So I would like to know, though, with respect to any of the redactions that have been made, and I want to get to the letter separately. I just want to, just specifically in respect to the redactions, with respect to the applications that are submitted, and I see there were pages 12 to 30, pages 48 to 66, 78 to 84, 97 to 103. There were certain, not just, redacted within a page, but certain pages that were fully redacted in accordance with Section 19 of the Access to Information Act. specific to, a privacy concern that you flagged. Are those privacy concerns related to other individuals or related to Ms. Verschuren?
Mr. Chair, it would have been a combination of individuals. We were asked for the applications for individuals. That would be considered personal information. That is a good chunk of.
I think we should treat them differently. I understand that, but I do think we should treat them differently, right? So I think it would be useful for this, to make sure that it's absolutely clear there's nothing hidden here, right? I think it's very important that I have no interest in information related to anyone else. Okay, no information. I do not care. If there's any personal information, my colleagues are right. We are Parliament. If there's any personal information related to Ms. Verschuren that you are concerned about and we're redacting because of the Access to Information Act, that is improper. And so whether we hold this in camera and we can determine amongst ourselves whether it should be public or not, we can, as a committee, discuss this. But I do think you should separate and you should come back to the committee and say, these particular instances have nothing to do with Ms. Verschuren and these other instances do. And my last question then relates to the letter that was held back based on the confidence of the Privy Council. What's the rationale for that? How can that be justified given the parliamentary request?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't mind clarifying the question. The letter that was held back.
It says there communications between the Privy Council and Minister Baines. There was, I think, one piece of communication that was held back because of confidence of the King's Privy Council. That was the document that we received. I mean, that seems like an inappropriate withholding, I think.
So, Mr. Chair, on that document, it was a cabinet confidence, so that would have been advice to cabinet. So you can take what you will in terms of the appointment itself, why we would withhold that document. To the member's question regarding the documents that we provided, I would note that we did redact Ms. Verschuren's personal information, and I think that it's important to redact personal information of all of the individuals in question. But I would say that you do know by deduction that Ms. Verschuren was on the May 19th letter. She qualified for the chair position. There was one individual who qualified for the chair position. So it is, to me, pretty clear, and we were clear with her on that point, that the information that we would provide would grosso modo reveal her candidacy, if you will. So as I said, I think, Mr. Chair, we've been extremely forthcoming while trying to respect the personal information of not only Ms. Verschuren but all of the candidates, but as forthcoming as we can be in terms of her overall application.
Yeah, by redacting every single page.
Your time is elapsed. Do you have one last question to wrap things up, Mr. Erskine-Smith, or are you satisfied?
No, satisfied. I just think, one comment perhaps. I appreciate how forthcoming you've been, especially here today. I do think, though, in the interest of ensuring that all air is cleared. I mean, if you're saying this information could be found at some other, then why redact it in some other manner? I think full disclosure as it relates to Ms. Verschuren it would be welcome.
Thank you very much. That is our last witness. I do want to thank Ms. McClymouth and Ms. Hamouni for your testimony and participation in relation to the study. I do have one question, which just is about the letters that Madame Sécla-Déghaye has requested. I just want to be clear on this about what the request was, and if you think you'll be able to provide it, which was the resignation letters. And I believe Madame Sécla-Déghaye understands redacting any personal information. Is that? I think you said you were going to endeavor to get them back to us in a format that would allow us to consider the contents. Is that?
We will endeavor to see if we're able to provide those. But I would, as I said, we may have to redact certain information. But we will check and see what is in the realm of the possible.
Okay, the committee might take that up. I know there's been requests for a number of pieces of information. If you could present those to the clerk in due course, and we'll certainly look for that information. It's not within 24 hours, so it is. Yeah, no, well, that's yes. We typically like to have the information within 21 days as a courtesy, so we look forward to that. I am now just going to just hold on. I've got committee business here, but I'm not there yet. I will see hands shortly. You are excused. I'm just going to suspend for 2 minutes here while the witnesses excuse themselves.
Okay. Oh no, look at Miss Khalid with her hand up. I want to be the first to talk, please. Me, teacher. Teacher, pick me. Pick me, teacher. Okay, so while they're suspended, let's see what the House is dealing with.
The Liberals continue to evade
Mr. Brock's
accountability. They are avoiding it so fiercely that they are willing to stall the work of Parliament, diverting our attention from the critical issues that matter most to Canadians. Issues like soaring housing costs, food insecurity, rising crime rates, increasing drug use, and the growing homelessness crisis. This is nothing short of shameful. The Liberals continue to tell the press that they are eager to move past this debate, claiming it is the Conservatives who are wasting time and resources. Let me remind them, they are the only members of this House who voted against this motion, that they alone possess the power to resume parliamentary proceedings. They could refocus on the issues that matter to Canadians by simply handing over all unredacted documents. It's as simple as that. Instead, they choose to hide behind procedural delays, prioritizing their own political survival over the urgent needs of everyday Canadians. This is a government that has completely tired and lost touch with reality, more concerned with covering their tracks than addressing the struggles of the citizens they were elected to serve. Perhaps this can serve as a wake-up call to this government. Recent polling from Abacus data paints a stark picture of the growing discontent among Canadians. A staggering 57% of those living in Liberal-held ridings want their Member of Parliament to call on the Prime Minister to resign and not seek re-election. Let that sink in to the Liberal members who are listening to this speech. This isn't just a minor concern. It's a clear signal from the electorate that they are fed up with the Liberals. Time is up. Moreover, only 1 in 5 Canadians believe the Prime Minister should run again. Almost half of Canadians want him to resign immediately. This is not just a rejection of his leadership, it's an entire rejection of the approach this government has taken. Among those who voted Liberal in 2021 but have since lost faith in the party, the numbers are even more alarming. A staggering 40% want the Prime Minister to resign immediately. This isn't just about political preferences, it's about accountability and trust. Accountability in the face of corruption. The evidence of mismanagement and unethical practices surrounding the SDTC and the Liberal government's Green Slush Fund is undeniable. Canadians are tired of seeing their hard-earned tax dollars misused while the government tries to cover its tracks. The Prime Minister's unwillingness to address these issues head-on and hand over the documents has clearly eroded trust and made it clear that accountability was never a priority for him and this government. Shameful. It is shameful. The question we must now ask, how much longer will this government ignore the voices of the very people it was elected to serve? The Liberals can no longer afford to dismiss the mounting discontent as mere political noise. We know that at least 20, if not 30 members really wanted the Prime Minister to resign as of today. They must recognize that their actions have consequences, and the people and Liberal members are demanding change. This data reflects a fundamental shift in the political landscape. Canadians are seeking true leadership that prioritizes their needs, not a government more focused on self-preservation and evading accountability. The public is rightly outraged at the corruption that has been allowed to fester under this Prime Minister, and it is time for the Liberals to face the reality of their situation or to step aside and give Canadians the carbon tax election they want and deserve. It's time for our country to be led by Canada's next great Prime Minister, the member for Carleton. As Conservatives, we stand ready. As Conservatives, we stand ready to offer a vision that restores trust and accountability in government. It's time for the Prime Minister to listen to the people and step aside for new leadership that puts Canadians first. The call for change is loud and clear, Mr. Speaker, and Conservatives are more than ready to form government, end the corruption, end the scandals, and ensure that the voices of Canadians are heard, but more importantly, to always respect the source of the funds that drive this country, taxpayer monies. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the rights of Parliament and Canadian taxpayers have been violated by this government's refusal to comply. The Speaker has ruled that the House must pause its work until the government fulfills its legal obligation to provide these documents. The Auditor General has exposed the shocking reality that the Prime Minister has turned the SDTC into a clear green slush fund for Liberal insiders with $390 million paid out in 180 cases of conflicts of interest. It is unacceptable that the Prime Minister and his ministers were aware of this corruption.
Okay, I hate to interrupt Brock, but the committee's back on.
Depending on you all, this shouldn't take a whole lot of time. We are expecting the public accounts 2024 to be tabled in the next couple weeks, certainly could be before the end of October. That will probably trigger a subcommittee meeting just to discuss how we want to incorporate those into our upcoming business. We do have motions that I'm working to get the witnesses through, but that is something that this committee will be tasked with reviewing over 2 or 3 meetings. Again, that will be decided at the subcommittee. In regards to our study on Report 6, SDTC, just want to kind of update you all. I'm not necessarily proposing any action today, but I just wanted to update you on a couple of witnesses that are pending. Hillary Leftik, in the motion adopted to invite Mr. Navdeep Bains and re-invite the witnesses that were here today, Ms. Leftik was also invited, and she's previously worked in PMO.
Oh, really?
She left PMO in 2022 and is not working in a similar capacity with the Government of Canada, and her information is not publicly available. The clerk is doing everything possible to track her down in order to invite her to this to a future meeting. I was hoping to have her here today with PCO because I am cognizant of the witness list and the calendar, and thought they would have been paired nicely together. Having said that, I think the witnesses today at PCO provided a good deal of information. So that one is still pending, but it is proving to be difficult. And then with respect to the 2 ministers, Minister Champagne and Guilbeault, invitations have been sent to their offices, and we provided dates through to December, and we're hoping for a positive response. And on the upcoming Monday, we'll have André-Lise Méthode as a witness. I'm now going to recognize Madame Sécla Desgagnés. Please, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My motion was supposed to be very quick, but I was asking if we could have a consensus to insist with the Privy Council so they can give you the letters of resignations of the board members with redacting personal information, but only personal information. Obviously. Do we have consensus about that?
On here a little bit. So, just I'm curious. Have you submitted a motion to the clerk? I realize you're looking for unanimous consent to. I will come to members. Don't worry.
Khalid's already saying me.
Looking for the committee to. I'm trying to think of the right word. Order the production of the true resignation letters with agreement that personal information, by that you mean address, can be removed.
Yes.
J'ai pas entendu. Vous avez dit deux?
I didn't hear. You said 2 letters? Yes, they're actually.
Yes.
Plus que deux.
So, it's a motion. It's not really UC. I mean, we could pass it quickly if we had UC, but I know Mr. Dudrain wants to speak. And Ms. Claire, I know you had it down. I'm going to, you're next on the list once we deal with this matter. So, Mr. Dudrain, did you have something to say you wanted to say about this?
J'ai peut-être mal compris, mais je pense que
Maybe I misunderstood, but I think you asked it during the committee, and then the chair asked for that, and he gave them 21 days to provide the information, so I don't understand that we need it now.
McCauley?
I think he did, actually.
Yes, it is. And I do believe a couple of years ago we did pass a motion in the committee that documents that they agree to provide to, witnesses agree to provide to us, are to be done in 21 days. It's very clear that the witnesses did not commit to that. So I think this motion is to ask, or UC to ask they actually provide it properly redacted for privacy concerns. But there was not any agreement very clearly from the witnesses that they would provide it. In fact, one of them very clearly was giving the no to that. So I think we do require a proper directive from the committee as an order document.
Let me speak to this quickly. I mean, the committee can certainly make that decision.
I think that's
we as a committee do
for.
take it on good faith that members will respond, and after 21 days, we can act again and then press it. I didn't see the head nodding or anything like that. Having said that, that's all I'll say. So, but I see Mr. Duran, your hand go up again. I saw Madame Secretary. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Peut-être qu'on peut attendre nos 21 jours.
Maybe we can wait 21 days, and after that we could pass a more serious motion. But now I don't see the need for this. And with all due respect, no one spoke to us here. So we're not giving our unanimous consent.
Par rapport?
May I ask?
What?
Put it to a motion and vote.
Motion to the. Okay. No.
Let's vote on
members
it.
like to have copies, and now that copies have been sent out, we will continue to debate this with Madame Secretary.
Let's vote on it. Come on, get to a vote.
So I thought it would be go more quickly. It's a motion on the fly, so there was no consent beforehand. I thought it would be obvious. They're important documents, and the answer we received, Ms. Arwi was shaking her head, no, we can't give those documents. And the final response we had from Ms. McClement
Sorry, I wasn't checking
is
chat
that
for a
they
sec there.
would see if, in discussion with lawyers, they could give them to us. I think it's important for us, for our studies, and for the next few weeks that we get them within the 21 days. And I'm speaking to you, Mr. Drouin, answering your question, so I think your phone is more interesting. 2 heads? So I don't know where the second one is. Okay. So we did not get a clear answer. And I think it's important that within the next 21 days we would have them, because we'll be seeing a lot of witnesses in the next few days. And it's important to get these documents as soon as possible. Why wait? So I think we shouldn't skip any steps. I think it's important that this committee send a clear message that these resignation letters are important to receive. So here again, we're making accusations that the witnesses maybe made some gestures. I didn't hear that.
Funny.
Mr. Macaulay said 21 days to your ear. I heard that. And Chair, you said normally we ask for documents within 21 days. You repeated it to the witnesses, and the witnesses said, yes, we'll see what we can do. So before going to the police right away, could we just let the witnesses do their work? So they come to the committee, and after that, we can take more drastic measures. So these resignation letters, in the large picture of STDC, I don't think there would be
you guys are too
highly
funny.
Revealing events. But the chair and Madame Desgagnés asked for these documents. The witnesses said, yes, we'll do it. So the chair repeated it at the end. You didn't even mention the 21-day limit, the chair limited. So before taking drastic measures, could we just continue? And when you don't speak to us, well, it's not true that I'll just let you adopt these motions. Speak to us first. Respect the committee matters like we did last time, and we'll support you. But here you're just coming with this on the fly. So, no, we disagree. Thank you very much.
Floor next, and then Mr. Macaulay. Order, please.
Not Ms.
Order,
Khalid.
order, please. I can put you back on the list if you like, but Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please. Ms. Khalid. Okay. Ms. Khalid is being very patient. Madame Secretary, whoa. Your motion is before the committee. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll echo the sentiments of my colleague, but also I do want to talk a little bit about the precedent that we set in committees. So, first and foremost, if we've been told 21 days, I'm not sure why we're not waiting for that time. And I say that because we are transitioning with SDTC. They are transitioning to a different model, to the NRC, and that will happen in the coming year. Yes, accountability is 100% important. And I think I've said this multiple times in this committee, in other committees, that accountability is very, very important. But I think that when we're working within the timelines and the constraints of not just the House, but also of departments, etc., and if we've been told 21 days, then I think that we should wait for those 21 days before we go into a production of documents. And that leads me to my next point, which I had alluded to earlier with respect to setting precedent. I mean, I've been in this position for 9 years now, and over this past year and couple of months, I've noticed that we are more and more calling for production of documents which, without giving the due diligence and the due time to the agencies and the departments that we're asking the documents from to produce that. What it's doing is creating a strain on our House resources. It's creating a strain on translation, on interpretation, to make sure that those documents are fulfilling the timelines of the motions that we are passing left, right, center in all committees, in every committee, and in the House, etc. It's a really bad precedent to set, I think, when we don't allow witnesses, experts, departments, the time to actually produce the documents that they've said that they're more than willing to provide within the timeline that they're offering. And for me, I think a 21-day timeline is quite reasonable. And pushing towards doing it sooner, doing it right now, I think is a really bad precedent for us to set, and quite frankly is disrespectful to House staff, to the people that support us on committees, and then also to departments who've made commitments to provide and have been actually quite forthcoming as we go deeper into this study on SDTC and its transition to the NRC. I think that allotting them the time, the 21 days, is the most practical way to go forward on this. And if we're not willing to be even that much forthcoming, where it's literally 2 weeks, then I think that there's something completely dysfunctional with how we're operating here as parliamentarians on this multi-partisan committee where we've all made a commitment to put our partisan politics aside and come together to hold accountable how government dollars are spent. And I take the point and the value of what my colleague has brought forward. I think it's absolutely important for us to get to the bottom of what's happening here. At the same time, I do recognize that there is a path forward over here as well, that there is a transition that is made, and there is not an urgency or a deadline to be pushing forward any document production order. When a department, agency, council tell us that they will produce a document within a certain amount of days, I think it is only respectful for us to respect the timeline that they've asked for. And if we're not meeting that timeline, if we're not waiting for them to get to that timeline, then I think that we're doing a disservice to our public service. Absolutely, accountability is why we are here. Accountability is why we sit on this committee hours and hours on end, and why we're diving into this study. But that doesn't mean that we put a rush for what purpose. Absolutely, we are transitioning from SDTC to the NRC. There is work that is happening, and 100%, I think Canadians have the right to know what happened in order for us to be in this place. But I think that if there is a timeline, then we should respect that timeline before we push for production of documents, which puts further restrain on our House resources and on our departments. I think that the waiting for the 21 days is the best way forward, and I am more than happy to revisit this motion after those 21 days have passed, because I think that it would be very disrespectful to our House staff.
Point of order, repetition. She said this 3 times.
Basis, if we moved on this beforehand. I'll park my comments there, Chair, but I would like to be put back on the bottom of the list again.
Thank you. I have Mr. McCauley. You have the floor next. Mr. McCauley, then Mr. Erskine-Smith, puis après ça, Mr. Boulris, puis après ça, Ms. Khalid. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. I would accept if we had an agreement or a positive response from our witnesses to the request. They made it very clear it's a "we'll see," not a "we will provide." So the motion that we passed a couple of years ago, requiring departments to provide documents or responses within 21 days, was to a positive response. It's not get back to us in 21 days whether you'll bother to respond or whether you will acquiesce to what the committee asked for.
Exactly.
The committee asked several times for these documents, and the answer was, we'll see. It wasn't, yes, we'll get back to you. It's, we'll see, we'll consider it.
Yeah.
While one of the members was very clearly indicating to the other member, no, no, no. But there was no, we will provide it. So it's pointless saying we'll get back or we should wait for 21 days when the witnesses made it clear they have no intent to give it to us. A we will see is not, yes, we'll provide the documents, which is why my colleague, Ms.
Thank you.
Or from the block, put forward this motion. It's very clear. The witnesses stated repeatedly about the high bar for terminating a order in council good behavior appointment, and yet very clearly these people, several of them, violated the rules of the conduct. It's very clear as well they all submitted the resignations after the Auditor General made her views clear on this whole scandal. So I think it's a very reasonable request that the PCO provide us with, perfectly redacted for privacy reasons, the resignation letters. It has to come as an order from this committee because the witnesses made it very clear. They did not say yes. They did not say, oh, of course we'll provide it. They said, we will see. So I think that is, and I understand what both Ms. Khalid and Mr. Drouin were saying. However, it's very clear the witnesses did not agree to provide us those documents.
Thank you.
Which is why we have a very straightforward request to make an order for the production of the documents.
Yeah, it's all in line. It's all in order.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Erskine-Smith. You have the floor.
Thanks very much. I guess my confusion is, I have thought, Chair, you had said to the witness, you had restated at the end, I thought, that there was 21 days and this, because you did say, my intervention was a little bit less clear, I think, in terms of if I was asking for something specific or not to actually come back to us with. I was saying they should, but I wasn't being prescriptive about, I'm demanding that you do something. Whereas then you, I think, clarified, so they understood their obligations to say, the expectation is that they would come back within 21 days with those mandate letters. I just want to be, that was my understanding. Was that your understanding as well? Because you did say that to the witness, I thought, unless I misheard it.
He's always confused about something.
I don't like to enter in the debate, but I did that too.
I just want to clarify if I misheard.
No, I think you had it right.
Yeah. So if that was the case, and I appreciate it, because I was like, maybe I misheard it and you didn't say 21 days. I have no issue with, I think passing a motion that says 14 days is probably improper because you directed a witness already on behalf of the committee as to what her obligations would be and the expectation would be. I'm perfectly comfortable, though, with you following up with a letter to say, further to my instruction, the expectation of the committee is that you provide us with these documents, and it can say sort of along the lines with them. It says, although it should say 21 days because that was what the original instruction was. So anyway, that would be my preference and my comfort level, as opposed to within minutes contradicting the direction that we've already given them, because I don't think the original direction was untoward at all. It made sense, and I thought there was I did think they were agreeing to what you were saying because they didn't contradict you. So that would be my sort of in the ordinary course preference, because it's sort of a typical practice, I think.
Thank you. Mr. Boulderie, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Boulderie, please. Thank you, Chair. So when Ms. Sinclair-Desgagnés, you presented your motion for unanimous consent, my first reflex was, yes, why not? Because it's really what we'd indicated as a request from the committee, well, from the chair, actually, to the witness. But after that, Chair, you said we still have to presume that the witnesses are there in good faith, and I'm sensitive to that because I think this is a reasonable motion, but it's a bit rushed in the circumstances because I'd like to have the time to make legal answers before saying yes. I think that was a prudent response from them. We'll see what we can do with this, and we'll come back within 21 days. It's always good practice to presume that the witnesses are there in good faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I really do
Oh, no, not Ms.
appreciate
Khalid again.
all of the comments from my colleagues on this, because I do believe that when we put forward motions within committees, we are setting precedent. Like, a lot of the work that we do, especially when it's procedure related, ends up in that big green book that then we rely on decades and decades afterwards. And if we give deference to a witness and allow them a certain amount of time, then I think
You
that
haven't
we
even
should
read the green book.
maintain that. That has been your ruling, as my colleague pointed out, and your discretion, as my colleague pointed out. But I do want to address something that my colleague across the way, Mr. McCauley, brought up, where he presumed that the witness had no intention to provide those documents. And I think that really speaks to exactly what Monsieur Bouleris was saying, what colleagues across this table have said, and that is about the good faith aspect and the powers of a committee and the respect that witnesses give when they come and testify at a committee and make commitments to that committee. Absolutely, the powers of the committee are outlined in convention, in our standing orders, in the way that the Speaker operates, in the way that you, Chair, operate within our committee. So for a colleague to automatically assume that a witness is going to disrespect the rules of a committee, to disrespect the values of a committee or the commitments made before a committee, I think is a bit presumptuous. And I think that we owe it not to the witness, but to the rules and regulations that govern our committee to respect the chair's discretion and to respect the timelines that have been provided to a witness before we get ahead of ourselves. I'm a person who likes to operate in good faith until I'm proven wrong. And I would like, Chair, for us to give that deference to any and every witness that comes before our committee, to be able to be given the chance to respect the rules of the committee. I personally would like to have faith in every witness and every expert that comes before this committee before I make presumptions as to what their intentions are. And I think in this instance, given also the points that I've made before, and I won't repeat them again, Chair, I think that this motion is, it's preemptory, it's premature, and it is at this point, I feel
Point of order,
unnecessary,
repetition.
and I think that we should revisit this after the timeline has passed. And I'll park my comments there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oui, Monsieur Drouin.
Juste sonder l'appétit de...
So, just talk about my colleagues who are discussing now with Mr. Bouleris. What I'm proposing is that we could, well, if we were in France, we'd say we'd park this. No. But that we discussed, but I don't see how the motion would advance any results, be it this evening or next week. So what I'm proposing is that we adjourn the debate and in that way that we could revisit it after the 21 days, as we asked. And that a letter that my colleague...
Are you proposing, or are you actually going to move to
Non,
adjourn?
j'ai dit peut-être.
Okay, thank you.
No, I said perhaps. And that perhaps what I'm suggesting is that in order to make clear to the witnesses what the chair proposed, I would go in the same vein as Mr. Erskine-Smith to send a letter directly to the witnesses so that it be clear that we expect that after they've checked with their council of the Privy Council, that they would come back to us and that we ask for a reply as soon as possible. And once they've received that, then the committee can make a decision. And it's not that we disagree with Ms. Sinclair de Gagné's proposal, but it's a drastic measure. So for no reason at this point, and in the same vein as Mr. Boulris, I also hope to believe that the witnesses came here in good faith, and let's give them a reason to believe that they're here in good faith and to provide that information, and then we'll be able to take more drastic measures if they're not in good faith.
Just summarize where you're taking us, and then if you like my summary, you can move your adjournment motion. So, Mr. Drouin is suggesting that the clerk and I follow up with officials that were here today from PCO, clearly outlining what we're looking for, and then we will adjourn this meeting. And if you're in agreement with that, please say so. All right. I have a motion to adjourn the meeting. I guess we take a roll call. Well, or we could look. I'm seeing some glum faces, so I'm never. So why don't we take the roll call? This is a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Shall the motion of Monsieur Drouin be adopted? Ms. Sorry? Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Mr. Erskine-Smith?
Yes.
Madame Khalid? Yes. Ms. Yip? Yes. Mr. McCauley?
No.
Mr. Nader?
No.
Mr. Cooper? No. Madame Sinclair de Gagné? Non. Monsieur Bourris?
Oui.
It's tied, is it? 5-5.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
It passes.
We are adjourned.
All right. Have you guys ever seen the movie Zootopia? That's how quick our government moves. The sloth from Zootopia. Yeah, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Obviously, they've adjourned the debate. That can happen. Anybody can just put a motion forward, and if it passes, it passes. So that's what happened there. Do appreciate the super chats today. I think it was Donnie and Savage. Appreciate you guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from Donnie. Holy smokes, man. You were on fire today. And if you guys, just before you guys go, it's my birthday tomorrow, actually. And so I'll be doing a giveaway on the, probably after question period. I'll be giving a $250 gift card to Walmart away. So it's not today. I know some people are saying happy birthday. It's very close for me. It's my birthday in 6 minutes because I am not in Canada right now. I am overseas. So for me, it is midnight in about 6 minutes. And I've got some family I'm going to call, from Canada and stuff. And I'm going to have a little bit of a early birthday thing. So I'm going to get to that here shortly. I've also got the Raptors game to watch. I do like my NBA and my NHL and stuff like that. So I've got some family to see tomorrow as well during the day, so I'll probably only be doing question period tomorrow. I won't be covering any committees, and obviously Friday we're not going to be live. So see some people saying happy birthday. Appreciate you guys. We're getting pretty close to it, so I will see you guys tomorrow for sure. definitely we're going to be on at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I will we'll call it here. Appreciate everybody. Thanks, guys. You guys keep it up with the chats. Have a good, fantastic rest of your evening, guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Cheers.